So we are officially in trade deadline season, as the trade deadline is in a couple of weeks. So I wanted to make a video today talking about every team's most likely trade candidate during this year's trade season. So there's going to be some big names mentioned in this video, and there's going to be some small names because we're going to see some notable trades go down over the next few weeks, but we're also going to see a ton of minor trades as well, where teams are trying to reshuffle their roster more so with their bench unit, especially if they're trying to go all in this year. So like always, let me know your favorite team's most likely trade candidate in the comments below, and did I get it right? Let me know. So we could start off with an obvious trade candidate, and that is going to be Cam Johnson of the Brooklyn Nets. Dennis Schroeder already got moved. Dorian Finney-Smith already got moved. This team wants to continue to lose games, and Cam Johnson is being the complete opposite of a tank commander right now. Cam Johnson is having a very good season to have the best year of his career for the Brooklyn Nets, because he's averaging 19.5 points, up 6 points per game than he was from last year. Looks way more confident with his shot. His shot diet is a lot better this year, and he's got a lot more workload under his belt too, because Mikal Bridges got traded to the New York Knicks. Yes, Cam Thomas helps him out at times on the offensive end of the floor, but we're seeing Cam Johnson be a lot better as a offensive creator, and I think that's going to be very appealing to teams at the trade deadline. He's shooting 42% from three on 7.5 attempts a night, which is going to be extremely valuable for a team trying to win a title. And he's making $22 million, so it's not the most amount of money in the world. A team should be able to go out and trade for Cam Johnson, and they don't really have to deplete their depth too much. And that's what I think is just going to make Cam Johnson's value be sky high at the deadline, because a lot of teams are going to be trying to trade for Cam Johnson, and there's a chance that the Brooklyn Nets could get 2 first-round picks just because he's under contract for this year, next year, and the following year, all around $21 million, which is going to be great for a team trying to add maybe your 4th best offensive option under this new CBA with all the first apron and second apron things. So I think it's very likely Cam Johnson gets moved to. It's just a bigger question to what team. The Knicks can do a lot at the trade deadline, or maybe they're not going to be able to do a lot, just because the big name that they could move, Mitchell Robinson, may not come back until after the trade deadline, because he's currently recovering from an ankle injury and that he suffered last year and he had surgery on in the offseason. He may get cleared in January. He may come back before the trade deadline, but if he doesn't, the Knicks aren't going to be able to showcase Mitchell Robinson to teams that they're going to try to trade him to. But I do think Mitchell Robinson could be more likely to be moved than like a Jericho Sims or Precious Achiuwa, just because he's making $14 million this year and $12.9 million next year. And when Mitchell Robinson is healthy, he's one of the best offensive rebounders in the NBA. He's a phenomenal alley-oop catcher, and he's a really good rim protector, and that is going to be very valuable to teams that could take a chance on Mitchell Robinson and hope that he could stay healthy throughout the rest of his career, because he's still just 26 years old. Like I said, he's under a good contract, and he's shown up for the Knicks in the playoffs before. He was very key for them against the Sixers before he got hurt, and against Cleveland 2 years ago in the first round of those 2023 playoffs. And I think the Knicks would be more inclined to move Mitchell Robinson than the other bigs that I talked about, just because he's making $14 million. Now you could try to get a couple rotational pieces back, or just a player better than something you'd get for Precious Achiuwa's matching $6 million or Jericho Sims matching $2 million. One of the smaller names we're going to talk about in this video is for the Boston Celtics, and that is going to be Jaden Springer, just because I think Jaden Springer could be used. Maybe you attach a first-round pick if it's for a big name, or a couple seconds to get another rim protector for Boston. I know they've been linked to Daron Sharp a little bit. Maybe they're able to give up multiple firsts to go out and get Walker Kessler. So Jaden Springer is making $4 million right now, so you can get a player better than what the minimum is going for. And I do feel like Brad Stevens makes a trade every year at the deadline. It could be big, it could be small, and I do think Boston is trying to maximize their championship window right now, and they're looking to add another depth piece, and Jaden Springer's matching $4 million can definitely get them one. I feel like there could be a couple of trade options for the Toronto Raptors. I was originally going to talk about Chris Boucher, but he's been playing very well as of late, and Toronto may look to just re-sign Boucher as a backup big man going forward. So I think the most likely guy they would like to move is Bruce Brown, and we're going to talk about him, but it is going to be a little bit difficult because he is making $23 million. Now, they could definitely help a bigger deal be orchestrated. There could be a 3-team deal, a 4-team deal, and Toronto could take back more money because they are not afraid of going into the second apron right now, because they are in a good financial situation, because Scotty Barnes' contract extension hasn't kicked in yet, and Bruce Brown recently came back from his injury this year. He's averaging 7 points, 3.5 rebounds. He's shooting 43% from the field and 31% from 3. I do think a team would like to have a Bruce Brown on their team. We saw how important he was to the Denver Nuggets in their 2023 championship run. It's just, is Toronto going to be able to pull off a deal where they can get an equal amount of $23 million coming back? Could a team that wants to add Bruce Brown give out $23 million? That is a decent amount of money, but I'm sure Toronto would like to move him. If you would ask me for Philadelphia going into the year, I would have easily said KJ Martin. There's a reason why they give him $7 million, so they can attach him with some first round picks to go out and get a name at the deadline. Well, the Philadelphia 76ers are one of the worst teams in the NBA, not just the Eastern Conference right now. They're currently 15-26. They have the 8th worst record in the NBA. It's pretty sad because the 76ers had title goals going into this year with their new big three of Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Paul George. So I think their new trade candidate could be somebody they're trying to now sell at the deadline, and that's Gershon Yabusele, who they took a flyer on in the offseason because he showed out in the Olympics for Team France, and he has definitely been a home run signing for them so far. I talked about him in a video I did recently, just talking about the biggest steals of the 2024 offseason. He has to be in there. He signed a 1-year minimum contract, and he's averaging 10 points this year, 5 rebounds, shooting 50% from the field, and 40% from 3 on 4 attempts a night. And this is for somebody that hasn't played in the NBA since 2019, and he's going out and being a productive rotational player this year for Philadelphia. He's making the league minimum at $2 million. Every team could trade for Gershon, so I think it'd be wise for Philadelphia, who may not be able to sign him in the offseason because they could easily get outbid. They're not going to have his bird rights since it was just a 1-year deal. So yeah, I think it would be wise for them to just try to get a first-round pick for him at the deadline, and then you hope to recoup some assets in the offseason and you change around your team's identity for 2026. I think an easy trade candidate for the LA Clippers has to be PJ Tucker. He's not with the team. The team doesn't want him. PJ Tucker does not want to be on the Clippers anymore, and his NBA career may be over, but he's making $11.5 million, and the Clippers are exceeding expectations this year. So they're a team that could end up being a surprising buyer at the deadline, as they are currently the 5 seed in the Western Conference at 24-18. So you attach, maybe it's a first round pick swap, maybe it's just matching salary, but $11.5 million for PJ Tucker can get you some offensive creator on the market. Either it's a Jordan Clarkson or somebody around that salary range, and it just gives the Clippers a little bit more flexibility than what they thought they had going into this year, because there was a point we thought that the Clippers could be at the bottom of the Western Conference right now with Kawhi Leonard's injury, but he is back. He's looked good so far in his minutes restriction. James Harden and Norman Powell have been carrying the load offensively, but I think while their defense is really good this year, they could definitely look to add another offensive-minded guy. Maybe that's a big, maybe that's a wing, we'll see, but I think PJ Tucker can help them get there. I mean, whenever you're watching the Lakers, do they look like a championship team? No, I don't think so. They just recently got embarrassed by the LA Clippers, and we already saw them make a notable move this year, trading away D'Angelo Russell for Dorian Finney-Smith. Now, I think one other move they could make is trading away Rui Hachimura, because they're not trading LeBron, they're not trading AD, they're not trading Austin Reeves. Those are the guys they're trying to win with right now, and the Lakers are currently the 6th seed in the Western Conference. They're 22-18, but I don't think I would take them over 6 or 7 Western Conference teams, and that's just talking about the West, because obviously I would take Cleveland and Boston over them at the minimum in the Eastern Conference, and Rui Hachimura gives them their best chance at making an upgrade. Now, they may have to attach Rui Hachimura's $17 million this year, $18 million next year contract with maybe a Jared Vanderbilt or a Gabe Vincent or Jalen Hood-Schifino that could help them get to a much larger contract if they're looking to add a Cam Johnson, and they could do Hachimura and maybe a first round pick to get there, and they can attach one of those other guys to do so. But Hachimura, I think, also has some trade value. I don't think teams are excited about getting back a Gabe Vincent or a Jared Vanderbilt in a trade. So Hachimura is still just 26 years old. He's shooting 40+% from 3 this year. There's times where he looks like a good defender, times where he looks like a bad defender, but he can definitely have some offensive value on the trade market. And I think if the Lakers are trying to go all in what could be LeBron's final good year, we'll see. That would have to be trading away Rui Hachimura, because he's making the most out of any of these guys we've talked about on the Lakers. I was going back and forth for the Phoenix Suns as well, because you could talk about Bradley Beal, but I don't think Bradley Beal is going to waive his no trade clause to go anywhere, unless it's like the Miami Heat and they're willing to take back Bradley Beal. I don't think they're going to want to do that. You could also talk about Grayson Allen. I was going to bring him up, but I do think that they're going to be able to move on from Yusuf Nurkic in some way, shape, or form, who's 30 years old. He does have 2 years left on his contract at notable money, where he's making $18 million this year and $19.3 million next year. They just recently traded for Nick Richards, who in his first game with the Suns had the best game for a center on Phoenix this year, by far better than any of the 25 games Yusuf Nurkic has played in. Nurkic has been suspended. He's shooting 32% from 3. He's been a well below average rim protector for this team, and he's currently getting DNPs basically by the coach's decision. So I think in some way, shape, or form, they're going to be able to move Yusuf Nurkic. Maybe they're going to have to attach a young asset. Maybe they're going to have to attach a future first-round pick to get off of this contract, and they're going to try to look to get another big man at this deadline. But I do think that Phoenix is going to look to make a trade, and it's going to involve Yusuf Nurkic. Sacramento has been playing so much better since they fired Mike Brown. They're playing Keon Ellis a lot more. It also helps they recently got Devin Carter back. They're currently the 8th seed in the Western Conference at 22-20. I think they're going to make a notable move and I think it's going to involve Kevin Huerter, because they're not touching any of the big three of Sabonis, Fox, and DeRozan. They definitely don't want to move Keegan Murray unless it's an offer they can't refuse. I don't think they're moving Malik Monk either. So Kevin Huerter makes the most sense. He's making $16.8 million this year, $17.9 million next year. That is notable money. Kevin Huerter is definitely overpaid right now from this version we're seeing of Kevin Huerter, not like that version we saw during his final years in Atlanta, or maybe his first year in Sacramento where he averaged 15 points and shot 40% from three. Because Huerter this year is shooting 30% from three, 41% from the field, and averaging 8.5 points. All career lows. And if Kevin Huerter, whose main goal is to knock down threes at a high volume, is not doing that, he really doesn't have much value for you on the basketball floor. But I think his matching salary could get them a good piece in return, either being a Cam Johnson or Kyle Kuzma or somebody they're trying to go after in that financial price range. Kevin Huerter can help them get there. Man, the Golden State Warriors have to make a trade, right? They just got embarrassed by the Boston Celtics, and we know that this team is not competing for a title with its current roster. And I do believe that they're going to try to make a notable move to please Steph Curry and try to make a run in the Western Conference playoffs, because right now they are the 11th seed. They're 21-21. They wouldn't even be a play-in tournament team. And even if you do make the play-in tournament, this is not as easy as it's been in years past. You would have to win 2 tough games to just become the 8th seed. So I think you could talk about Jonathan Kuminga. They could look to move him, but I think they're going to try to look to extend him or maybe come up with a trade in the offseason. And I know we talked about how good he's been for the Warriors at times this year, but they can't really get to a big number contract coming back unless they move Andrew Wiggins, who's making $26 million this year, $28 million next year, and $30 million in 2027. He has a player option then. And in the offseason, we talked about this being one of the worst contracts in the NBA. And I think the Warriors need to realize they're kind of getting blessed right now with Wiggins being locked in this year. He's healthy, and he's playing the best he has since that 2022 championship run. Is he a perfect player to be your number 2? No. And this team needs to upgrade that spot next to Steph Curry. And the only way in doing that is trading Andrew Wiggins, because you're not trading away Draymond Green. Wiggins would be the guy. He's recouped most of that trade value back right now. I think a team would want Andrew Wiggins on your team, so I think you should try to sell high at this year's deadline. Next up, we have Cody Martin of the Charlotte Hornets. I think the Hornets could be somewhat of a notable seller at the deadline. I don't think they're going to move Josh Green or Grant Williams. They already moved Nick Richards. They could move Vasilije Micic as well, but I think Cody Martin would make the most sense for teams that are trying to add a good rotational piece for the playoffs that shouldn't cost much. Nick Richards basically went for 2 second-round picks. Cody Martin would probably go for around the same range. He's averaging 8 points this year, 4.5 rebounds. He's shooting 44% from the field, 33% from three, and 69% from the free throw line. He is making $8 million this year and $8.5 million next year, which could be a nice trade piece as well if things doesn't work out for the team that acquires him at this year's deadline. But for Charlotte, I think you just want to move on from him. I think he'll have some value out there as this hustle player coming off the bench that can get some rebounds and can score off ball. And I'm sure Charlotte would like to add another shot creator or another point of attack defender, but I think they could become more buyers in the offseason when you have your team fully healthy going into 2026 and hopefully another top draft pick that could end up being Cooper Flagg. For the Washington Wizards, I'm going to talk about Kyle Kuzma. You could talk about Malcolm Brogdon. You could talk about Jonas Valanciunas, and Valanciunas would be a little bit easier more to move because he's making around $10 million less per year than Malcolm Brogdon, but Kyle Kuzma makes the most sense. And I think if Washington could just get off of Kuzma, you should do so. I don't think he's a good veteran to have on your team. He really does not help you out defensively whatsoever. And he's shooting 25% from three this year and 42% from the field. And you should have traded him 2 years ago. You should have traded him last year. And they refused to do that, or maybe didn't get a good offer. Well, he's definitely hurt a ton of his trade value this year. But I think it's just better to get him off this team and you really embrace this young core right now, because you would also free up some financial flexibility going forward. He's got a good contract. $23 million this year, $21 million next year, and then it goes down to $19 million in 2027. So if a team thinks that he could be more bought in now that he's not going to be in one of the worst winning environments in the NBA, that could definitely be an appealing contract. And for Washington, like I said, just embrace that youth movement. Let's get him off the team, and the defense should improve as well. I guess this is the most obvious one of the video for the Miami Heat. We're going to talk about Jimmy Butler. He does not want to play for this team anymore. It's been the biggest soap opera in the NBA all year long. He's 35 years old. He has a $50 million player option for next year's season. So will he be an expiring contract? Will he not be? That is a big question mark. Jimmy is averaging career lows in Miami this year. 17 points across 24 games, 5 rebounds, 4.7 assists. He's shooting 54% from the field, 34% from three, and 79% from the free throw line. he doesn't really want to be there. He's publicly stated that a ton, and he did just come back from a suspension. He started a couple games for the Miami Heat, and they did lose to the Denver Nuggets in his first game back. They did beat the San Antonio Spurs by 21, but he had just 8 points. He went 3 of 7 from the field. He just doesn't want to be there anymore, and it's pretty much inevitable that he's going to get traded very soon. I struggle to figure out who I wanted to mention here for the Orlando Magic, because I think Wendell Carter Jr. could have been an interesting name, but they re-signed him too close to the season starting, so they can't do that. So I think somebody that has definitely been playing good for them with all these injuries going on, but that also could help out his trade value, so I think they should sell high. Cole Anthony, because you just got Paolo Banchero back. You're going to get Franz Wagner back very soon. You hope Jalen Suggs can be healthy enough throughout the second half of the year, and Cole Anthony has still a tradable contract in a way. $13 million this year, $13 million next year, $13.1 million in 2027, and that is a team option. So maybe if you can get something from the LA Clippers, maybe, because he has been good at times offensively this year. In Cole Anthony, where he just dropped 23 points against the Boston Celtics, he dropped 27 points on good efficiency against the Philadelphia 76ers, and that could have some value on the market. And I think this contract was probably not tradable before he had some of these offensive flashes with all these injuries. He's not a perfect player, but I think they could look to add a more consistent shooter, and Cole Anthony's matching salary can get them there. So maybe that's PJ Tucker, more so getting draft capital back, or maybe you could do a trade with him to Utah and you can get Colin Sexton back. The Atlanta Hawks are 22-20. They are the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, and they could definitely make the playoffs as a non-play-in tournament team this year. I think they could look to move Clint Capella, because Onyeka Okongwu has been great over his last few games. He's really showing out as a starting center for this team, and just more so the best center on this team. They have Larry Nance Jr. hopefully coming back from injuries, and he could be a serviceable enough backup big. Clint Capella makes a ton of sense for Atlanta to try to add some shooting or defense at the deadline. Capella this year is averaging 9 points and 9 rebounds, shooting 56% from the field, but he is making $22.2 million. But hey, that could be maybe a Bruce Brown team, and Bruce Brown could go to Atlanta, Clint Capella can go to Toronto, and there could maybe be some draft compensation going back to Toronto in a way of second round picks, so Toronto doesn't have to just buy out Bruce Brown, and at least they get something. That's just the idea, that you can move Clint Capella, who's making a decent amount of money at $22 million, and that could definitely add you a piece to Atlanta at the deadline, as they're just trying to make the playoffs this year since they don't own their first round pick in the draft. So yeah, they want to win. Next up, we're going to talk about Keldon Johnson of the San Antonio Spurs. Yeah, an interesting name here. I would have expected to talk about Chris Paul at one point this year, but I don't think they're moving CP3. The San Antonio Spurs are 19-22 right now. They are the 12th seed in the Western Conference, but Chris Paul does so much for this team that doesn't show up in the box score, just being an overall leader, an overall difference maker, culture shifter over there in San Antonio, and he can help out a ton of the young guys' development. I think, though, if they could find some trade for Keldon Johnson, they would do it. He's making $19 million this year, $17.5 next year, and $17.5 million in 2027. Off of that 2023 campaign, Keldon Johnson has been going down and down with his offensive numbers and his overall efficiency and his minutes per game as well. He has not started a single game for the Spurs this year. He's averaging just 24 minutes a night. He's getting to the free throw line a lot less as well, and just his usage is down a ton, and I think his time in San Antonio could be coming to an end soon. This is an interesting one for the Dallas Mavericks. I was not going to talk about him, but recently they made him available in trade talks, and that's going to be Daniel Gafford. And yeah, they recently made Gafford available via trade that Christian Clark of The Athletic reported. They made big trades last year, acquiring Daniel Gafford from the Washington Wizards and getting PJ Washington from the Charlotte Hornets. They have Derek Lively, so they have their center of the future on their roster right now, who's playing good this year, so they could look to add a perimeter defender, because Dallas desperately needs one to play alongside Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. And Gafford is coming off a monster game against the Charlotte Hornets, where he had 31 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 blocks in 34 minutes. He shot 80% from the field, and that's definitely going to help out his trade value to opposing teams on the market. Gafford is making $13 million this year, $14 million next year, which could also be very appealing. So I think Dallas could get a good perimeter defender if they were willing to trade away Daniel Gafford. And if they are, they could be in the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes. I also struggle to figure out who the Houston Rockets' most likely trade candidate would be, because I do think that they are going to just stay put. I don't believe that they are going to go out and trade for Jimmy Butler, but I think that may be the only move for them on the table if they don't want to go after like a Cam Johnson as well, because I don't think they want to move Cam Whitmore or Reed Shepherd, any of their young guys. They want to hold on to those Phoenix Suns first round picks. I don't think they would want to move Dillon Brooks either. He's been a good piece for Houston all year long. I would say Fred VanVleet may be the most likely guy, and that would be in a big trade. Now, they could probably work out some type of trade that could send Fred VanVleet to Brooklyn, and they can get Cam Johnson in return, so they can pick up Cam Johnson without willing to have to trade away Dillon Brooks. Fred VanVleet is averaging career lows with his efficiency for the Houston Rockets this year, shooting 33% from three, 38% from the field. He's averaging 15 points, 6 assists. He has been way too inconsistent offensively this year. He's still a good veteran point guard on this team, but for somebody that is making $40+ million this year, he is not living up to that contract. He does have a $44 million team option next year, so this is basically an expiring contract for Fred VanVleet, so that could get to the Jimmy Butler salary very easily. Or yeah, they could maybe trade to a team that has some cap space like Detroit or Brooklyn if they're willing to take on Fred VanVleet. For the New Orleans Pelicans, it has to be Brandon Ingram, right? He's a free agent at the end of the year. Trey Murphy's balling out. Zion, they would be selling at his lowest value, so they don't want to move him. They're not trading away Herb Jones, I think, or Jordan Hawkins this year. They're not trading DeJounte Murray either. Maybe it's CJ McCollum that could rival Brandon Ingram in terms of their most likely trade candidate. But yeah, Ingram's a free agent at the end of the year. He's played 18 games this year. He's currently still out with that ankle injury. He's averaging 22 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists, and I think he was good enough throughout those 18 games where teams are like, last year was maybe a little bit of a down year for Brandon Ingram, but he looks a lot like he did in 2023. He's making $36 million this year. He's still just 27 years old, and he's a great scoring forward at 6'8", a great playmaker as well. It's just you'd have to give up notable assets for him, and you'd have to extend him because there is the risk that he could leave in free agency. But if the Pelicans don't trade him and he leaves in free agency, we're going to look back at this moment and say, wow, they really fumbled this Brandon Ingram situation. Memphis should make a trade, right? They're 28-15. They're the 3 seed in the Western Conference. They're just a half a game out of the 2 seed from Houston, and they have a contract that can easily match some other players that are available on the market this year with Marcus Smart, who's 30 years old. He's averaging 9 points, 2 rebounds, and 4 assists. The efficiency is not good. 37% from the field, 33% from 3, and this is somebody that won Defensive Player of the Year in 2022, and Smart is still a fine defender, but he is far from looking like what he did for Boston in that 2022 season. He is making $20 million this year and $21.5 million next year, so it's not an expiring contract, but it's not the worst contract in the world. If he ended up going to a rebuilding team, they don't really care about his $21 million next year, but they can go out and get a notable name on the market because Smart can easily get them there. They have a ton of depth they can move. They have some draft capital as well. I think it's very likely that Marcus Smart is not on the Memphis Grizzlies after the trade deadline. I wonder if Indiana is going to make a big splash because their lineup of Tyrese Haliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Benedict Mathurin, Miles Turner, and Pascal Siakam looks very good. The odd man out right there could be Aaron Nesmith, who's been banged up this year. He recently came back the other night against Detroit. He's averaging 9.5 points this year throughout 8 games. He's shooting 58% from 3, and he's under a good contract as well. $11 million this year, $11 million next year, and $11 million in 2027. That could be very valuable on the market, and I think if it came down to it, they'd rather move Aaron Nesmith than a Jarris Walker, but Indiana may just trust their depth and not make a big move at the deadline. Detroit desperately needs to add somebody that can take some of the load off of Cade Cunningham's back because the Pistons could make the playoffs this year. The Detroit Pistons at this current moment are the 9th seed in the Eastern Conference. They're above 500, 22-21, and a contract they can easily get to somebody that can help them offensively, Tim Hardaway Jr. So Tim Hardaway Jr. is making $16 million, and it's an expiring contract as well. And you can attach that along with Tobias Harris's $25 million, and we can get somebody that can help out Cade offensively, because it is unfortunate Jaden Ivey went down, but Cade Cunningham is playing like a borderline top 10 talent in the NBA this year, and you can make the playoffs, Detroit. Why not? Go all in. There's some names on the market that could definitely help you. Would you want to go after Brandon Ingram? If you think that's too much, go after CJ McCollum, who's been a great offensive talent this year, and he could be a great number 2 next to Cade. They could go after Zach LaVine as well, or maybe they're a team that takes back Andrew Wiggins in a 3-team trade. Jimmy Butler would be cool, but I doubt he wants to go to Detroit, but they can easily make a big move. They have the assets to do so. They have the matching salary, and that could be Tim Hardaway Jr. and Tobias Harris. Let's get Cade some help. So for Milwaukee, a cop-out answer would just say Pat Connaughton. They could easily trade him with 2 seconds, get 1 second back, and they're under the second apron. But I think a bigger name that they are going to move, because I think Milwaukee is in a desperate time where they're trying to maximize the Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo window. They're going to trade Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton this year is 33 years old, averaging career lows since basically 2014. 12.5 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. He's shooting 48% from the field and 37% from 3. He's still a good player, but he's getting up there in age. He's been recently moved to the bench for the Milwaukee Bucks, and he is making $31 million this year, but does have a player option of $34 million next year. And the way he's playing right now, he's definitely going to opt into that contract. So you would have to pay Chris Middleton notable money next year. But is there a way that they dish out Pat Connaughton to a team, get under the second apron, and then attach Middleton and Brook Lopez for Jimmy Butler to try to go all in this year? I wouldn't put it past them, just because they shocked everybody when they traded away Drew Holiday to get Damian Lillard. So I think Chris Middleton could end up getting moved, which would end a very good career in Milwaukee. For the Cavs, let's go all in this year, right? I think Jalen Tyson would be their most likely trade candidate if they're looking to make an upgrade at the deadline. And if they wanted to go after somebody like Cam Johnson, Tyson could definitely be appealing to opposing teams. He did have one really good game this year against the New Orleans Pelicans, where he dropped 16 points and shot 58% from the field. Obviously, he hasn't had the chance to play a lot because the Cavs have been at times the best team in the NBA record-wise for most of the year, and they have a very deep team, specifically with wings, with Okoro, Donovan Mitchell, Dean Wade, George Niang, Karis LeVert, and Max Strus, who even missed some time. They are very deep at that position. Jalen Tyson, their recent first-round pick, number 20 overall in 2024, they can look to attach him in a trade if they wanted to add some big man depth or another shooter. There's two big names that are most likely to get traded for the Chicago Bulls, Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine. Nobody wants Patrick Williams. I know that came up recently, but he's making way too much money and it's been very bad this year. But I would say Nikola Vucevic is just going to be easier to move than Zach LaVine. I know he's a decent amount of years older, but he's making a lot less than Zach LaVine, where Vucevic is making $20 million this year and $21 million next year. That's about $20 million less than what Zach LaVine is making. And with everything going on with the second apron and the current CBA, it's just a lot easier to trade for Nikola Vucevic at the deadline. And he's playing like prime Karl-Anthony Towns, prime Dirk Nowitzki with his shot this year, where he's shooting 41% from 3 on 4.7 attempts a night. He's also shooting 55% from the field, averaging 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 3.5 assists. This is one of the better years of Nikola Vucevic's career, probably the best year of his career since that 2021 season, when Chicago was like, let's give up Wendell Carter Jr. and 2 first-round picks for him. So I think Nikola Vucevic could end up getting traded. Probably the most likely Bull to end up getting moved. I mentioned a bunch of names for the Utah Jazz. I think John Collins could be on the move. I think Jordan Clarkson could be on the move. I think Colin Sexton, though, would be a very valuable trade for a ton of teams out there that are looking to add some shooting or microwave scoring off the bench. Sexton this year, 26 years old, averaging 18 points, 4 assists, shooting 48% from the field and 41% from 3, as well as 90% from the line. He's a fantastic offensive talent, and he's doing all this playing under 30 minutes a night, and he's way more valuable than a Jordan Clarkson. I think John Collins is super valuable as well. It's just that Colin Sexton is making $8 million less than John Collins, so it's just an easier contract to move, and Sexton is also under contract next year as well at $19 million, which I think would be more valuable on the market as well. I had no idea who to put here for the Denver Nuggets because they're not trading Jokic. They can't trade Gordon or Murray because they signed contract extensions late in the offseason. They're not moving Russell Westbrook or Christian Brown or Julian Strawther. I'm sure Zeke Naji would probably be the most logical answer, but I just want to talk about Michael Porter Jr. because I feel like he's the wild card in all of this. But Denver has been playing much better as of late, as they're currently up to the 4th seed in the Western Conference. They're 26-16. Jamal Murray's been a lot better. Aaron Gordon is fully healthy, and Michael Porter Jr. is still an elite shooter. 51% from the field, 41% from 3 on 6.5 attempts a night. For some reason, he's shooting 70% from the free throw line this year, but he's averaging 18 points, 6.5 rebounds, and a career high 2.4 assists a night. So maybe all things are working out for the Denver Nuggets. I think probably Zeke Naji is the most likely trade candidate, but I think Michael Porter Jr. that ends up getting moved for them. I know they were linked to Jimmy Butler at one time, or Brendan Ingram, or Zach LaVine, and MPJ is the only way they could pull one of those trades off. I don't think anybody wants DeAndre Ayton in Portland. I don't even know who would want Jeremy Grant the way he's playing this year and how big that contract is. So I think Robert Williams is the most likely trade candidate for the Portland Trailblazers. Time Lord is 27 years old. He does not look like the same player he did for the Boston Celtics, where he finished number 7th in Defensive Player of the Year voting in 2022, but he has looked somewhat healthy this year. He missed some time to start off the year, but he's played 14 games, averaging 17 minutes a night, 6 points, 5 rebounds, and is still a solid rim protector, and he's making $12 million this year and $13 million next year. That is such an easy contract to move, and these players come at a premium in the league, and they could be valuable in terms of just having center depth, because centers get hurt all the time. They're the biggest bodies out there. You want to have as much depth as possible. Robert Williams may not even go for a first round pick, so I think it's very likely he is off of this team at the deadline. I also think OKC may not make a trade, and I may disagree with that. I think if there's a chance that they can go out and get to the matching salary of Cam Johnson, you go out and do that. You can't draft 3 to 4 players every year, and they have Nikola Topic in the wings. It looks like they hit on the AJ Mitchell pick, but they had the 11th overall pick in the 2022 draft, Ousmane Dieng. I think they should trade him if there's a move out there, because Dieng this year has appeared in 23 games, but is just playing around 10 minutes a night. He did have a good game recently against the Brooklyn Nets. That was a blowout win, so we got to see Dieng a little bit more, and he's still 21 years old, and maybe this is going to be the Sam Presti way, where you just don't play them a lot on their rookie contract, and you're able to extend them on a well below market value deal on their next deal, and you can have them for a full 8 years in your system. But he's making $5 million this year, $6.6 million next year. You can attach him with either Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, or Kenrich Williams, and you can get to a decent amount of money to match one of the bigger names on the market. But it's looking like that OKC isn't going to make a notable move at the deadline, and their big acquisition is going to be to get Chet Holmgren back fully healthy. And the last team we're going to talk about, the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is kind of a shocker with just everything expected going into this year. We're going to talk about Julius Randle. Yeah, this team looks just so much better offensively when Naz Reid is out there than Julius Randle. Randle is averaging 19 points this year, 7 rebounds, 4.5 assists, shooting 47% from the field and 33% from 3. And he's had his good offensive moments, but Randle has not gelled well with this team defensively this year. He's making $33 million this year and is a $30.9 million player option next year. There's a chance Randle opts into that, but he could opt out of it because he's going to get a lot more money than $30 million in the grand scheme of the deal. It may be across 2 to 3, 4 years, but he's going to get way more than $30 million total. So he may opt out, set him up for a lot of money over the next few years, and which could be his last notable contract of his career, since he is 30 years old. But Minnesota has been disappointing this year. They are currently the 19th in the Western Conference. They just lost Dante DiVincenzo for a lot of time. He may miss the rest of the regular season, which would be massive, because Mike Conley's been disappointing, and he stepped up as that lead guard role next to Anthony Edwards this year. So I think they could look to move Julius Randle. I think he would have somewhat of a market out there for teams that are looking to add another offensive talent, and I do believe that Minnesota is going to trade him at one point throughout the next couple of weeks. So that's going to be for me. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, I would appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. Let me know if you agree or disagree with who I talked about with your favorite team's most likely trade candidate in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you were not already, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.